The mission was successfully completed. As I was leaving the world, I deliberately teased the male lead, "I'm pregnant with your child." Julian's eyes darkened, and his hands trembled as he held me. I closed my eyes smugly, but when I opened them again, I was back in this world. One system, are you sure the main god isn't messing with me? Staring at the familiar world before me, I was completely stunned. Just a minute ago, I had triumphantly left this world, deliberately teasing the scheming male lead from the novel before dying. And now in the blink of an eye, I'm back. I get it now. This isn't about completing a mission. This is about getting me killed. The system munched on popcorn. Don't worry, you've got a whole new appearance now. And it's been 3 years, Julian. 1T recognize you. Hearing the system's words, I felt slightly reassured. I cursed Julian silently in my heart. That guy never gave anyone peace of mind. The mission was already completed, and now he had to go and turn dark. Not only did it make me fail my performance metrics, but now I have to come back and clean up this mess. I muttered to myself in my mind while the system sneered beside me, "You brought this on yourself." I rubbed my nose and fell silent. It was true. If I hadn't acted out of spite when leaving that world, I could be been enjoying my retirement vacation in the next world by now. But here comes the problem again. How am I supposed to approach Julian in this vast sea of people to complete the mission? Julian has always hated being deceived the most. He already knows I approached him to complete my mission. He must despise the person I was before. Besides, I've completely transformed into someone else now. If a complete stranger went up to Julian and said, "Hey, I'm your ex-girlfriend, I suggest you hurry up and become a good person," how realistic is that? I'd definitely be treated as a lunatic and hauled away. I was already distressed when suddenly a dull pain shot through the back of my neck. The world spun violently as I lost consciousness. Damn it, who dared to ambush me? 2. I felt drenched in sweat, extremely uncomfortable. Did I instantly teleport to Death Valley? My whole body burned fiercely, as if surrounded by multiple giant heaters. I could feel my thin clothes already soaked through with sweat. Something's wrong. I struggled to open my eyes. The room was dimly lit and luxurious, with only a single warm yellow lamp turned on. An indescribable fragrance lingered in the air, seductive and provocative. I tried to move my hands only to realize I was tied up. What the hell, system? What are you doing? Why didn't you warn me? Suppressing my panic, I kept calling out to it. The system remained silent for a long time. Just when I thought it had disappeared, a lazy voice finally responded, "Sleeping, don't disturb me. If you keep sleeping, I'll be done." For the system took a look. That's quite a unique look you've got there. After all that talk without getting any useful information, I decided to take matters into my own hands. The moment I moved, the door swung open. I swallowed hard. Sometimes luck just falls into your lap. And there he was, none other than Julian, the big CEO. I'd been trying so hard to get close to my old flame. Julian staggered weakly, taking a few unsteady steps in my direction. The strong smell of alcohol made me frown in displeasure. I've never been fond of the scent of smoke or liquor. Moreover, this was far too intense back when Julian was with me, except for necessary social occasions. He never smoked or drank in front of me. Someone gripped my chin, harshly forcing me to lift my head and meet Julian's gaze. Julian's face was cold, his eyes dark and unreadable. They held emotions I couldn't decipher, turbulent and intense. I felt as if I was being stared down by a starving wolf. The aura of the man before me was even more overwhelming than it had been 3 years ago. I instinctively held my breath, my legs trembling so badly I could barely stand. After a long silence, Julian let out a low, hoarse chuckle. This time they sent someone who looks quite similar. Pity, no matter how alike, she's not her. His voice turned icy, by the end laced with unmistakable disgust. I shivered. Forget it. My life is more important. This version of Julian is someone I can't handle right now. It's better to think this through carefully, so I put on an ingratiating smile. Sorry, I don't know who sent me here. I'll leave right away. Could you help untie me? Julian coldly spat out one word, "Go." Fine, if you want to explain, then don't so fierce. Good thing I ran away fast back then. Suppressing the heat coursing through my body, I wriggled my way off the bed. But the moment I turned the doorknob, a hand suddenly clamped around my wrist. Wait. My heart skipped a beat as a bad premonition washed over me. Yet Julian merely stopped me, slowly undoing the ropes binding my hands. "Thank you," I said, sincerely flexing my wrists. Julian's gaze lingered on my face for a long while, as if trying to see someone else through my appearance. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have minded him staring at me. But at this moment I had been drugged and could barely suppress the burning heat within me. My gaze grew hazy. I couldn't help but let out a soft moan. The sheer wantonness in that sound startled even myself. Julian's expression changed abruptly. Though he was typically cold, he became extraordinarily passionate in certain matters. It wasn't as if we hadn't had intimate encounters before. At this thought, I curled my lips into a smile and deliberately exhaled. "Mr. Julian, are you staying behind to be my antidote?" The moment these words left my mouth, Julian immediately took a large step back with a darkened expression, avoiding my advance. The prayer beads on his wrist clattered with his movement. His look couldn't have been more disgusted. As if afraid of being contaminated by something filthy, I thought to myself, good, he is still as fastidious as ever, otherwise I really wouldn't be able to stop myself from pouncing on him. Julian slammed the door and left. I heaved a huge sigh of relief, rushing to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. Still not enough, I tugged at my dress, impatiently turning on the shower to take a cold bath. But unexpectedly Julian returned quickly. He was holding medicine and a glass of water. I froze for a moment, belatedly remembering to wrap the towel around myself. "Get out," I snapped at Julian. Julian averted his gaze, but thrust something into my hands, his tone icy and commanding, leaving no room for refusal. "Eat it." I didn't refuse because I knew Julian well enough to understand he wouldn't resort to tricks over something like this. And yet I fell for it. Damn him, how much he'd changed. For when I woke up, I was no longer in the hotel. Opening my eyes to familiar decor, this was the room I lived in 3 years ago. I looked around, nothing had changed, even that porcelain fawn with the lame leg remained exactly where it had been. So this was Julian's villa. He actually brought me back here. For some reason, a faint, inexplicable irritation welled up inside me. If he still had feelings for the old me in his heart, then why would he bring back a replacement now? But if there wasn't the slightest trace of affection left for the old me in his heart, why would he have preserved all these things from the past so meticulously? Julian was someone with very strong boundaries. His personal space had never tolerated the intrusion of unimportant people. In the past, I was the only one who had ever lived here. It seems these 3 years have truly changed him. I laughed mockingly in my heart, so I really wasn't that special to Julian after all. Lost in thought, the bedroom door suddenly swung open. Come down for dinner, since you're awake. Familiar words, a familiar scene. If not for the electronic shackle around my ankle, I might have thought I'd gone back 3 years in time. Perhaps because the surroundings felt too familiar, I subconsciously assumed this was a safe place and began speaking to Julian with unguarded ease. What does this mean? Does Mr. Julian intend to engage in illegal confinement? I moved my ankle and asked him. The man before me glanced at my pale ankle, his eyes darkening. Slightly. Nothing, it's just to keep you from running around. Why did you appear in my room last night? Surely you haven't forgotten know your place. Me, what exactly is my place? I truly don't know. Hannah, since the Taylor family has already given you to me, stay by my side, and don't go anywhere without my permission. Julian stepped closer, pinching my chin as he spoke each word deliberately. In his eyes I saw endless obsession and possessiveness. But dude, I came here for you. I wasn't planning to run in the first place. I brushed off his hand and rubbed my chin myself. I didn't say I was leaving. The next moment my gaze naturally fell on the Buddhist prayer beads around his wrist. If my memory serves me right, Julian was someone who never believed in gods or Buddhas. He received elite Western education from childhood and firmly believed in science and rationality. I used to be scolded for half a day whenever I went to church to pray. But now, do you believe in Buddhism? I hesitated for a long while before finally asking. Julian reached out and touched the prayer beads, responding with a simple Then he gave me a deep look before turning and walking away. Taking advantage of the empty surroundings, I quickly summoned the little system. Hey system, what is going on? Who exactly framed me? Who else could it be but your so-called parents now? The system lazily stretched before slowly pulling up the files. Speak of the devil, just as we were talking, the father of this body I'm inhabiting now called. I heard Mr. Julian took you home. The voice on the other end of the line sounded excited. Try harder, and maybe next month we can get Mr. Julian to give our family the Cedar Ridge project. Even though I still hadn't remembered my identity, that didn't stop the instant surge of disgust I felt upon hearing these words. I curled my lips and replied casually, I'm afraid that's not possible. I don't have that kind of influence. Of course you do. I made sure to find out Mr. Julian particularly likes your type. Perhaps noticing my prolonged silence, the other end added, don't worry, as long as you help the family accomplish this important matter, your father won't treat you unfairly. As if they were offering me some great favor. I rolled my eyes to myself and replied perfunctorily, alright, we'll talk later. Mr. Julian is calling me. Just as I hung up, I saw the aforementioned Mr. Julian staring straight at me from the doorway. It's unclear how much of that conversation he actually heard. Julian never used to eavesdrop on phone calls. Even if he caught me on a call, he'd politely excuse himself. So what exactly happened to him these past 3 years? Such a drastic change. I forced a smile and asked, enjoying the show, Mr. Julian? Just when I thought he wouldn't answer, not enough, he replied word by word. Meanwhile, some things might differ from my previous understanding, but one thing remains unchanged. Julian is still extremely busy with work. While Julian was occupied with work in the study, I began surveying the home I had personally decorated 3 years ago. I wandered through every room except one, the locked one. But when I opened the window, I froze. As a notorious plant killer, I'd spent so much time trying to grow roses only to watch them wither under my care. Yet now they hadn't just survived, they flourished, filling the entire garden. Vibrant and alive, I'd once boasted to Julian that I'd make them bloom across the entire backyard. Back then, he'd frowned at the wilted rose seedlings I'd tortured, remaining silent for a long while. But in the end, I reluctantly agreed with him. Julian's face rarely showed much expression. But after staying by his side for so long, I could understand his indulgence. Now that time has passed, looking at the garden full of roses, my heart was filled with mixed emotions. While casually strolling around, I also finished listening to the information the little system had dug up. The body I'm currently inhabiting is named Hannah, the illegitimate daughter of the Taylor family. The Taylor Corporation has recently encountered financial difficulties and hopes to recoup their losses through the Cedar Ridge project. So they set their sights on Julian, the head of the Julian Group. No one knows where they heard about Julian's preferred type, but they realized this illegitimate daughter's face could still be of use. An idea came to mind to send the original owner of this body to Julian. Naturally, she disagreed and ran away from home. Unexpectedly, an accident occurred. No sooner had I transmigrated than I was found by the Taylor family. They knocked me out cold and delivered me straight to Julian's bed. After hearing all this, I could only curse. What a scumbag of a father. The little system closed the database, glanced at the shackle on my foot, and clicked its tongue twice. When did Julian develop such twisted tastes? What a coincidence. I'd like to know too. It continued chattering, detected that Julian's current danger level remains relatively high, but his emotions have stabilized significantly compared to before, reason unknown. This is a favorable signal for you. You need to hurry and complete the mission. With that, the little system vanished. I knew it had gone into hibernation again. I don't know what happened, but ever since we went on that mission together 3 years ago, the little system has been constantly dormant. I shook my head, pondering how to bring the corrupted Julian back to the right path. My current identity is nothing more than a decorative vase sent by the Taylor family to please him. But wiretapping my calls, locking me up, and restricting my movements, these aren't behaviors a normal person should have. Julian really wasn't acting like himself. Glancing toward the study, an idea came to me. 7. As a decorative vase, I naturally had to fulfill my role properly. I changed clothes and brought Julian a cup of coffee while he was working hard. This wasn't the first time I'd done something like this. It came as naturally as breathing. Julian opened the door, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. But he didn't say anything. I've always been good at pushing my luck. With Julian's iceberg-like personality, waiting for him to make the first move would be like waiting for the sun to rise in the west. If not for my shameless persistence, 3 years ago, I'd never have been able to pluck this unattainable man Julian from his pedestal. Back then, I put a lot of effort into pursuing Julian. Learning to cook and brew coffee for him were trivial matters. As long as it was something he liked, I would try it just to have common topics to discuss. This included reading those mind-numbing philosophy books or overcoming my fear to learn racing. Julian took a small sip of his coffee and remained silent for a long while. I couldn't help but feel a bit flustered. Did I mess up? Has his preference for lightly sweetened coffee changed? I grumbled inwardly. Why was he even harder to please than 3 years ago? The coffee is delicious, he said, the corners of his lips curling into a faint smile. That was his happy expression. I immediately felt relieved. But the next second, Julian stared intently into my eyes. So how did you know my taste, and where did you learn this technique? My momentarily eased heart instantly tightened again. This time I've really messed up. In my haste to please Julian, just now I completely forgot that I'm not Leah from 3 years ago. My current identity is Hannah, a decorative vase just sent over by the family, someone who should have had zero prior contact with Julian. How could I possibly know Leah's habitual way of making coffee? Julian was not an easy man to fool. His sharp gaze, like that of a hawk, made me feel utterly exposed. In my panic, I blurted out a random lie. My father deliberately had someone investigate to make me please you. I just learned it now. The overwhelming pressure in his eyes shifted away. I see. Julian's tone returned to its usual cold indifference. For some reason, I feel like the person before me is in a bad mood again. 8. Julian's current temper is as unpredictable as Seattle's weather. But what can I do? I chose this mission target myself, so I'll just have to indulge him. Ever since I moved in, Julian has been working from home almost every day. If I stayed in my room, it was fine, but the moment I stepped into the garden, he would glance at me through the window at regular intervals. At first, I didn't even notice it until one day, I wandered all the way to the villa's front gate. I had only meant to tease the little dog passing by. But the moment I got close, someone suddenly grabbed my wrist. Julian's eyes were frighteningly dark, his grip on my hand painfully strong. I spoke softly through gritted teeth. The Julian I knew before would never show his emotions so openly, even when angry. He always maintained perfect composure. In fact, the angrier he got, the more his lips would curve upward. This was the first time I'd seen Julian like this, still gripping my hand. His voice came out hoarse and menacing. You're leaving. I said, you're not allowed to leave without my permission. I flexed my wrist and whimpered in a pitiful voice, it hurts, you're hurting me. Only then did Julian snap out of it and release my hand. He stared at the obvious red marks on my wrist, a flash of regret passing through his eyes. I pretended not to have seen anything and slowly explained. I'm not leaving, I just wanted to play with that little puppy. Julian followed the direction of my finger and indeed saw a puppy that had already run far away. He lowered his eyes and fell silent. I understood Julian's issue. He lacked a sense of security. He was afraid, yet I felt conflicted. The more Julian doted on me, this replacement, the more inseparable we became, and logically, I should have been happier. It proved that everything I was doing now wasn't in vain. Yet I couldn't help but ache for the person I used to be. So the old love couldn't compare to the new. No matter how much time I spent warming his heart, in the end I was easily replaced by a stand-in. Now I'm replacing myself, but if I never returned to this world, would Julian also find someone similar to keep by his side, letting her live in the room I once occupied, using my belongings? I shook my head, somewhat despising myself. Did I really expect Julian to remain chaste for me after I left? 9. My mood suddenly grew somber. Julian still wore that same indifferent expression as always, pacing back and forth. He was agitated. I stole a glance. Julian had his fingers curled while his other hand held a rose in full bloom. Here, take it. Such a straightforward and domineering remark. Was he trying to cheer me up? Seeing my hesitation, Julian somewhat forcefully pressed the rose into my hand. Ouch, I winced softly. The thorn on the rose's stem pricked my finger, and a bead of blood instantly welled up on my fingertip. Julian's face darkened instantly. He snatched the rose away angrily, intending to throw it to the ground. Wait, don't throw it, I said somewhat reluctantly. In the past, I'd spent so much effort, yet never managed to grow one like this. Besides, the rose was blooming perfectly fine, until someone plucked it abruptly. Now it's about to be thrown to the ground for no reason. If I were that rose, I'd feel wrong too. Julian's movements paused, but in the end, he left that rose behind. Yet the very next second, I froze. Julian pinched my finger and brought it to his mouth. My face instantly flushed crimson, though it was meant to stop the bleeding, a perfectly practical act. Julian, that untouchable flower with his devastatingly handsome looks, was now making such an unexpectedly sensual gesture with an utterly expressionless face. All I could think was, man, you're playing with fire. If not for catching sight of Julian's completely serious expression, I might have suspected he was deliberately teasing me. Unfortunately, he really was just stopping my bleeding. A fleeting sense of regret passed through my mind. Strike while the iron is hot. Taking advantage of Julian's apparent trace of guilt toward me, I pushed my luck and tested the waters. Can you unlock the shackles on my feet? 10. Julian became visibly restless ever since I brought up removing the electronic lock. But I don't want to give up such a great opportunity. I want to know Julian's bottom line regarding me, his substitute. Julian locked himself in the room, the only one I couldn't enter before. 3 years ago, it was just an ordinary study. But 3 years later, it was locked tight, not even allowing me a glimpse inside. My intuition told me there was a secret inside. One, Julian, didn't he want me to know? Several hours had passed, and I knocked fearlessly. Julian, time to eat. There was no response for a long while. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear what was happening inside. The result was a stumble, and I fell straight into Julian's arms. He suddenly opened the door. I was stunned by this unexpected embrace. Julian gave me a complicated look before I could decipher what that gaze contained. He had already led me into the room. Seeing the scene before me, I could barely hold it together. The room not only housed my memorial tablet, but also had an eternal candle burning beside it. The tablet bore the name Leah. That was me from 3 years ago. What is this? I began playing dumb. Julian, lost in memory, said softly. This is Leah, my beloved, the wife of the Julian Group's CEO. My heart trembled. Wherein we at most just ex-lovers. How did I suddenly become his wife? Did he think Leah would never return? So he made up this lie. What lover? What CEO's wife? 3 years ago, Julian abandoned me at our engagement banquet to chase after that woman he could never forget. We never even got married. If it weren't for that, I wouldn't have been so heartbroken that I terminated the mission and left this world. 11. Today, Julian seemed unusually willing to talk. He sat there speaking in a low, unhurried voice, as if chatting with an old friend telling a rather unremarkable love story. Several times, I nearly interrupted him. That wasn't what I meant at all, yet he misunderstood. But I couldn't reveal my identity now. In the end, Julian concluded she was just a player toying with my feelings and body and playing favorites. I had completely lost my temper and could only keep agreeing, yes, she is terrible. But I love her. Even if she deliberately approached me for a mission, even if she intentionally deceived me, I still love her. I was left speechless. This was precisely why I had been hesitant to reveal my true identity. Let us not even mention such an unbelievable thing, systems and missions and whatnot. Years ago, I had indeed approached Julian with ulterior motives from the very beginning. My heart was only focused on the mission with little room for genuine feelings, yet I regret not heeding the system's advice to guard my heart. In the end, I fell for Julian. I wanted to spend my entire life with him in that world. Such things weren't without precedent. If a task seeker found their life's purpose and wished to remain in a particular world, it was permitted so long as they were willing to pay the price. At that time, I was silently planning everything in secret, fully prepared to accept the punishment. Unexpectedly, on the day of the engagement, Julian left. His expression was anxious, and he gave me an apologetic glance. But he still left. I had always trusted Julian deeply. Even though a troublesome ex kept appearing by his side, I never saw them as a threat. And Julian never let me down. No matter what that ex said, he would coldly ignore them. I never expected that I had overestimated the feelings between us. Having completed so many missions, I naturally knew that many misunderstandings arose simply because the male and female leads never spoke their minds. I wondered if Julian had some unspeakable difficulty. But time was running out. I couldn't wait for his explanation. 12. According to the rules, as long as I wear this ring, the mission will be considered successful. After serving my punishment back home, I can stay in this world forever. But alas, at the final moment, everything fell apart. My mission failed. I desperately tried to convince myself to trust Julian. He does love me. Julian wasn't good at expressing emotions and spoke very little. If I hadn't been observing carefully, I wouldn't even be sure he truly had me in his heart. I actually felt quite insecure. I thought I could keep convincing myself. But the moment I saw him abandon me to go find that woman, I could no longer suppress the pain and resentment in my heart. Moreover, since the mission failed, I had to go back and face the punishment. In a moment of impulse, I forcibly terminated the mission ahead of schedule. Ironically, shortly after I announced the mission, and Julian came rushing back in a hurry. At that time, I was still sulking and deliberately turned my head away, refusing to look at him. Julian looked at my obviously abnormal state at a complete loss. I know everything. Don't leave me. I remained silent, only using my gaze to carefully trace his features, engraving him into my heart. The good thing about me is that I can take things up and put them down with equal ease. I truly loved him once, but if there is still room for someone else in his heart, then I don't want it anymore. I decisively gave up on Julian. Finally, unable to contain my anger, I whispered mischievously in his ear, I'm pregnant, it's yours. Julian's pupils instantly dilated, his breath growing faint. He held me tightly, refusing to let go. Leah, don't leave me. No matter what happens, I won't let you go, he said through gritted teeth with obsessive determination. But Julian, as a character in a book, had his own fate controlled by others. How could he possibly keep me? In the end, I still vanished. As my consciousness faded, I felt a cold sensation on my ring finger. Julian, tears streaming down his face, slipped a ring onto my finger. In the end, against all odds, I actually succeeded in winning him over. Unfortunately, it seems I arrived a bit too late. I had thought we would never meet again, never imagined the main god would arrange for me to return to this world. The mission target was still Julian. After finishing the story, Julian remained silent for a long while. His gaze burned into me as he suddenly asked, "Do you think Leah will ever come back?" 13. I regained my freedom. Julian replaced the electronic lock with a red string. But that last question of the day made my heart skip a beat. Fortunately, he seemed to be talking to himself. Seeing that I didn't respond, he didn't seem to mind. "She will return." Julian left with just those words. In the end, I was left alone in the room facing my own memorial tablet. Well, since I'm already here, so I lit a stick of incense and offered it to myself. After all, not everyone gets the chance to worship themselves. Rarity makes things precious. I stared at the red string around my ankle for a long while, a slow smile spreading across my lips. At least this counts as progress. I was just pondering my next move when Julian unexpectedly informed me I'd be accompanying him to a banquet that evening. "Really?" I asked in disbelief, seeking confirmation from him once more. I never imagined Julian would one day voluntarily allow me to go out. I hadn't stepped outside since the day I returned. Sometimes I wonder if Julian already knows I'm Leah. Otherwise, why would he be so afraid of me running away? Yet if he knew, how could he remain so calm, merely restricting my movements? Unable to figure it out, I eventually gave up. Going out used to be such an ordinary thing, but for someone who has been confined for so long, even stepping outside has become a joyous occasion. Truly, you only realize what is precious when you've lost it. The banquet hall was filled with elegantly dressed guests and the clinking of wine glasses. The moment Julian appeared, all eyes turned towards him. It had been so long since I'd seen this many people, and I felt somewhat uneasy. Instinctively, I moved closer to Julian, seeking some sense of security. Then I looked up and saw the curve of his lips. Julian was in excellent spirits. "Mr. Julian, you've arrived." The moment Julian entered, he became the center of attention, with a continuous stream of people coming up to greet him. I've never been fond of these occasions, so I quickly slipped away to the side to grab some food. Julian frowned slightly, but he was truly too busy to break away and could only watch helplessly as I made my escape. I raised my glass to him with a distant smile. In response, he gave me a look that was both exasperated and indulgent. What a pity I'd barely taken 2 bites of my freshly acquired little cake when someone interrupted me. "Leah," came Scarlett's voice, tinged with shock and disbelief. This drew another gaze from nearby. It was the original antagonist of the story, Chris, also Julian's half-brother. As for Scarlett, she was Julian's white moonlight in the original novel. 3 years ago, Julian abandoned me because of a single phone call from Scarlett. When rivals meet, their eyes blaze with hostility. Holding my wine glass, I smiled faintly. "You've mistaken me for someone else. I'm Hannah. I don't know any Leah." Scarlett was still drowning in fear and shock, muttering repeatedly, "It's impossible. How could this be?" 14. Compared to Scarlett's shock, the look in Chris's eyes beside her was far more profound and meaningful. I pretended not to have seen anything and shifted my gaze to Scarlett. She was startled by my sudden appearance, just as I was shocked by her current circumstances. The Song family was once a prominent clan, nearly on par with the Julian group, and Scarlett had been the little princess doted upon by the Song family patriarch, raised in the palm of his hand. From childhood, she was the apple of everyone's eye. Scarlett's pride stemmed not only from her own excellence, but also from the confidence instilled by her family. Yet the once pampered princess now wore a simple, cheap-looking gown. If my eyes didn't deceive me, the watch on her wrist was a knockoff too. It seemed the Song family had fallen upon hard times to bring down such a deeply rooted, powerful family. Ordinary people couldn't achieve this. The only one I can think of is Julian. No, perhaps Chris could too, but neither of them seems to have any reason to target the Song family. My inquisitive gaze swept between Scarlett and Chris. Adhering to the principle of not meddling in others' affairs, I set down my glass and prepared to leave. But I never expected Chris to stop me. I haven't had much interaction with Chris. But since I stand on Julian's side, that naturally makes me Chris's opponent. Of course I know about his past with Julian. Money makes people arrogant. Chris is Julian's father's illegitimate child. The 2 brothers were only a few months apart in age, yet their treatment was worlds apart. Julian lived a life of luxury, while Chris endured hardship. Eventually, Chris learned the truth about his origins and successfully entered Julian's household. But Chris resented everything at first. He hated Julian's father, and after the father's death, he transferred that hatred to Julian himself. Julian would take whatever caught his eye, whether it was living or dead, until I appeared, and Chris's gaze naturally fell upon me. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't snatch me away from Julian's side. I had come for Julian in the first place, of course. He couldn't take me away. I don't know when it started, but this competition gradually took on a different meaning. One day Chris stopped me. "Leah, be with me. I can give all my family assets to Julian, and I won't oppose him anymore. Just be with me." At that moment, I didn't seem to respond because Julian appeared out of nowhere. Without saying a word, he immediately threw a punch and started brawling with Chris. This farce ultimately ended with both of them spending a week in the hospital. But ever since that incident, Julian had become tense. He was constantly worried about my safety, afraid that Chris might do something to me. I didn't feel there was anything to worry about myself. At that moment, Chris stopped me just like he had 3 years ago, his tone casual and flippant. "Your name is Hannah. Lovely name. Why not come with me?" I weighed my words carefully, catching sight of Julian approaching from the corner of my eye. Before I could answer, Scarlett suddenly rushed over, her voice shrill. You're not Hannah, you're Leah. 15. With these words, it felt as if the world had been put on pause. The air was terrifyingly still. I cursed inwardly, you idiot. Miss Scarlett seems to be suffering from sleep deprivation and hallucinations. I struggled desperately to salvage the situation with Julian S.'s scorching gaze on my left and Chris S.'s meaningful look on my right. Sandwiched between the two of them, I felt goosebumps rising all over. I have things to do, I should go. Just as I took a step forward, both my hands were seized. Julian and Chris each held one of my hands. This outfit is really hard to describe. Are these two brothers trying to escort me to the execution ground? But it's almost like that. Let go. 3 voices rang out simultaneously. They belonged to Julian S., Chris S., and mine. I rolled my eyes and repeated more firmly, let go. The perfectly good banquet ended in yet another fight. The next day, when I saw the exaggerated headline, Online Tycoon Brothers Brawl Over Mysterious Woman, I wanted to bury myself in shame. Julian S.'s face was still bruised. I had been too angry to tend to him last night. He hadn't even bothered to treat his own wounds. I was convinced Julian was heaven sent to torment me. In the end, I couldn't stand it anymore and said stiffly to him, go get the first aid kit. Julian was behaving like an obedient child, now doing whatever I told him. I sighed inwardly. If only he'd been this compliant last night. Since my identity had already been exposed anyway, I felt utterly fearless as I carefully applied medicine to Julian S.'s wounds with a cotton swab. He sat on the sofa, his arms tightly encircling my waist, his gaze never leaving me for a moment. Even my thick skin couldn't withstand the heat of his stare. I snapped at him fiercely. What are you looking at? Julian didn't say a word, only burying his face in the crook of my neck. I froze in place. Julian S.'s scalding tears spilled out uncontrollably as if they cost nothing. The liquid soaked through my collar, cold and chilling. He choked back a sob. Leah, you finally returned. 16. I couldn't help but tilt my head back, blinking rapidly to force back the welling tears. I reached out and embraced him tightly. Every time Julian showed his emotions, it was because of me. He wasn't good at expressing himself, even had emotional barriers. It wasn't until I returned here again that I glimpsed the deeper feelings in his heart. He carefully preserved everything about me, whether it was the ceramic deer I made on a whim or the rose I had tormented until it was barely alive. He took good care of them all for me. A man who never believed in gods or Buddhas now kept prayer beads in his hands every day after I left. He set up a memorial tablet and lit an eternal candle. Julian used every possible means to try and bring me back again. He didn't know if I would return, when I would return, or in what form I might come back. Like a little puppy waiting for its owner to come home, he only knew he had to wait for me. Clumsy yet sincere, how could a puppy ever mistake its owner? Julian clearly recognized me the moment we reunited. When I refused to speak of it, he indulged me and even played along with my act. Afraid I might leave again, he drew me into his territory in his own way. It wasn't until Scarlett exposed my identity that the abandoned puppy finally threw himself into his master's arms, weeping silently. Julian knew before I could finish speaking. Julian kissed me. A kiss mingled with tears, fierce, yet filled with endless longing. As if trying to pour out all the longing of these 3 years, I closed my eyes and drowned in Julian S.'s fierce yet tender love. It lasted until dawn. Daylight streamed in, and when I glanced down, I couldn't help but cover my forehead in exasperation. It was truly unbearable to look at. Julian had never been gentle in these matters to begin with. Of course I loved his dominance too, but these bite marks all over my body, what was this? Did he really think he was a puppy? Julian S.'s arms held me tightly, and even in his sleep his brows remained furrowed. The moment I stirred, he woke with a start. Only after confirming I was truly still there did Julian finally relax. His first words came out brimming with grievance. I missed you so much. Those words sent ripples through my heart. I nestled closer into his embrace. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I missed you too. Since you know my origins and secrets, can you tell me why you abandoned me 3 years ago? 17. Scarlett said, she knows your secret. If I didn't go, your life would be in danger. Julian finished speaking and tightened his arms around me again, as if confirming my presence. I frowned slightly. Scarlett, how did she know I don't belong to this world? At this moment, a long, unheard voice echoed in my mind. The little system spoke in a drowsy, lazy tone, as if it hadn't slept enough, because she's not from this world either. Scarlett also has a system, and she knows the plot. No wonder then Scarlett must also know that task performers will face punishment if they fail to complete their mission. Those who are in serious condition will be eliminated, so she tried every possible means to drive a wedge between Julian and me. During the time Julian and I were together, Scarlett also came up with all sorts of tricks to seduce Julian. When she saw that Julian had truly fallen for me and there was no other way left, she used news about my safety to lure Julian away at the last moment. Scarlett knew that Julian cared about nothing else, only my safety. At that very time, Chris was fiercely opposing Julian and had set his sights on me. Back then, Julian was constantly on edge. He feared even the slightest mistake would make me leave him, yet I failed to realize that for someone inexpressive like him, this was Julian's unique way of loving. Putting myself in his shoes, if someone used Julian's safety as bait, I'd go too. Julian, seeing that I hadn't spoken for a while, slowly leaned in closer. In a voice barely above a whisper, he said, by my ear, I love you whether you're Leah or Hannah or someone else entirely, no matter how many identities you've taken, I love you. So can you promise not to leave me again? He looked at me with hopeful eyes, the last question asked with cautious vulnerability. I was just about to nod in response when a cold mechanical voice abruptly echoed in my mind, "Congratulations, host, mission accomplished. 18A successful conquest means I'm about to leave this world. Whether the mission succeeds or fails, in the end, I'll be forced to depart from this world. Because I never truly belonged here in the first place." Julian's eyes dimmed as he waited in vain for my response. He remained silent, only tightening his arms around me as if trying to press me into his very being. Julian buried his face in the crook of my neck. I'll learn how to express emotions, how to be in love, how to love you. I picked things up quickly. Just give me some time. I can definitely do it. Leah, will you wait for me? My heart melted completely, and I opened my mouth wanting to agree immediately. But it was impossible. If I couldn't be sure of returning, I couldn't give Julian hope. Otherwise, this little fool would stubbornly wait for me just like before. Holding back tears, I asked the system in my mind, can I still choose to stay in this world? Are you sure you want to stay here? I nodded. Back then I became a quick transmigration task taker because I was seriously ill, and then I was chosen by a system calling itself number 03. I began traveling through different worlds to complete missions. Number 03 and I were old partners. Now I want to stay permanently in Julian's world, which means I'll have to part ways with number 03. A cold mechanical voice responded, "If you choose to stay here, you will be stripped of your identity as a dimensional traveler and return to your original state. In other words, you will revert to being terminally ill and bedridden with little time left." My nails dug deep into my palms, but I barely noticed the system asked me again for confirmation. "Do you agree?" I agree. Rather than carrying memories of Julian and never seeing him again in this lifetime, it's better to spend these final moments together properly. Sometimes the outcome isn't necessarily what matters. After a long pause, the little system said the agreement is signed and takes effect immediately. Yet, I froze in shock. Why was my body still healthy? I hurriedly asked the little system. Its voice had somehow developed static, the cold mechanical tones crackling with interference. I have to concentrate hard to hear what it's saying. As a senior employee by the goddess side, of course, I can pull some strings. Consider it a wedding gift for you. After working together for so many years, I've always known this day would come. Goodbye, my friend. 19. I burst into tears instantly. This was the first and last time the little system ever called me friend. I used to tease System 03 for being a little stickler. It was always so serious, rigidly following the rules without showing any leniency. Of course, that was one of its defining traits, but I've seen other small systems that were quite lively. So in my free time, I'd always try to provoke it, hoping System 03 would become more cheerful too. But every time it would puff up angrily and tell me to behave myself, I'd say, "We're partners and friends, don't be so distant." The little system would sternly refuse each time. "No, we're just partners, not friends." I found it strange. How did it get such an idea? Until I heard about System number 09, who became friends with its host, and somehow the host ended up falling in love with the system. The host and the system were ultimately punished by the main deity, and they still haven't emerged to this day. This incident sent a shock through all the little systems at the time. As a result, System number 03, already quite serious, became even more stern. The voice of System number 03 no longer echoed in my mind. 3 years ago, it began to hibernate for long periods until finally its voice became distorted with static. Yet I faced no punishment, able to keep my healthy body and remain in this world. Nothing comes without a price. If I didn't pay it, then someone must have carried the burden for me. Facing the void, I whispered softly, "Thank you, Unit 03, my friend." 20 Julian has made great progress ever since he said he wanted to learn. I receive his confessions every day. But later I don't know who he learned from, or what nonsense he picked up, because for a while he became particularly fond of acting spoiled and complaining. Even when I just went out normally with friends, he would whine beside me. "Leah has found new friends and forgotten the old ones, but it's okay. Who made me like Leah so much? Leah, you go ahead. Even if I'm left at home with no one to keep me company, alone and feeling cold and lonely, it's fine." I immediately pinned Julian down on the sofa and kissed him fiercely until his face turned crimson, finally making him agree to let me go out. The Song family had completely collapsed. Gradually, their presence disappeared from various banquets. I also learned that the Song family's rapid downfall was indeed Julian's doing. As for the Taylor family of my current identity, Julian turned a blind eye to them, using his name to pull strings, considering they had actively sent me back to his side. Occasionally, I'd leak some business information, consider it the utmost of my benevolence. Alas, human greed knows no bounds. Like a snake trying to swallow an elephant, that man I nominally call Father grew increasingly insatiable. The fortune originally built upon the Julian group was nearly all lost again. Now he's behaving meekly, not daring to stir up trouble anymore, as Julian's formidable rival Chris suddenly changed his temperament. He handed the company over to his trusted aide and went on a world tour. I tried hard to feel the beauty of this world, hoping not to waste a single minute. One day Julian mysteriously told me he had brought back a small gift from his business trip. When I opened it, I found a tiny AI robot. No larger than a palm, yet incredibly intelligent. On the back was engraved number 03. Suddenly my eyes welled up with tears. Hugging Julian, she kissed the corner of his lips. "Thank you." Julian quickly hugged me back. "Then do you remember you owe me something?" What a baby me. I remembered the lie I had fabricated the first time I left that world. Julian blushed and asked me, "Isn't it time to repay your debt?" I leaned in and kissed him first. "Yes, let us do it now." The end.